Today, we're going to be talking about NASCAR's massive sponsor, Exodus. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. If you've noticed over the last 10 years, a lot of major companies and a lot of major brandings have left the sport. And most notably, just this recent past week, it was announced that M&Ms would officially be leaving the sport, and Mars, the whole Mars company, that being Skittles, and all the companies associated with Mars, they would be leaving the sport after sponsoring NASCAR for over 30 years since 1990 when they started sponsoring for Bobby Hillin Jr. They are officially going to be leaving the sport. And this has been a major issue over the last 10 years. And there are a lot of brands over the last years, especially, that have left the sport. National Guard, they haven't sponsored in NASCAR since I think 2014 or 2015. Actually, 2014 they sponsored, but they stopped sponsoring in 2015. Pepsi branding, they left after 2020. They sponsored Henry Motorsports and basically sponsored Chase Elliott in 2020. They have not sponsored since. Mountain Dew, same thing. Mountain Dew was a longtime sponsor who sponsored for many years in the sport. They've not sponsored since 2020. They did not sponsor in 2021. Now, M&Ms, of course, they're going to still be sponsoring in 2021, but they're going to be leaving 2022, but they're not going to be sponsoring in 2023. Lowe's, they left the sponsor sport after 2018. They've been sponsoring NASCAR since the 1990s when they started sponsoring Mike Skinner, and they have left the sport after 2020. They left the sport after 2018, and really they didn't get a fair shake at the end of 2018 because basically Lowe's wanted to focus on football. Another company, Home Depot. Home Depot left the sport after 2014. They've been a longtime sponsor of Joe Gibbs Racing from 1999 up to 2014, and they left the 20 car. Worldwide Technology. Now, Worldwide Technology, of course, they sponsor Racetrack right now. When it comes to cars and stuff, they sponsored Richard Petty Motorsports in 2018 and I think 2019 and 2020, and they did not return to sponsor Eric Jones in 2021. AT&T. AT&T has not sponsored in NASCAR for quite a few years, and they really left after 2008 when they lost their opportunity to sponsor Rich Schultz Racing because basically Sprint took over control of everything. Speaking of Sprint, they have not sponsored in NASCAR since after 2016. It was possible maybe they could return to sponsor a team in 2017, but they officially altogether left the sport after 2016. Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels has not had a major branding in NASCAR since 2009. Now, of course, they had one off with Austin Dillon, and I think either 2018 or 2019, but they've not sponsored ever since. UPS. UPS has not sponsored in NASCAR since 2011. They sponsored Dale Jarrett for many years. They sponsored David Reagan, and they also sponsored other drivers as well. And also, I think they maybe sponsored Mark Marr 1.2, maybe back in 06 and stuff. But they used to sponsor a couple guys. They don't sponsor anymore in NASCAR. They've not sponsored in 10 years. DuPont. DuPont, I think, kind of configured over to Exalta, but DuPont is not sponsored in NASCAR in many years as well. Target. Target left the motorsports world overall after 2017. They didn't just stop sponsoring Chip Ganassi Racing in NASCAR. They stopped sponsoring them in IndyCar and also their INSA programs as well. U.S. Army. U.S. Army has not sponsored, I think, since 2013. They left the sport in 2014. And this is when the U.S., basically the military, they decided to drop a lot of their brandings in NASCAR because they dropped some of their focus on that. Aflac. Aflac is not sponsored in NASCAR since Carl Edwards left in 2014, and they did not go work with Carl Edwards after 2014 over at basically Joe Gibbs Racing. Aris. Aris stopped sponsoring in NASCAR, I think in 2017 or 18. I think, of course, they cut over to ComScope, but they've not sponsored in a couple years now. They have not sponsored Daniel Suarez for a couple years, so they left the sport. They went and sponsored Daniel Suarez and Xfinity Carl Edwards in the Cup Series. Jimmy John's. Jimmy John's have been a sponsor in NASCAR, I think, since 2010 or 2011, and they started sponsoring Kevin Harvick, and they've not sponsored in 2020 at all. Basically, had their last sponsorship in 2021, and then Subway came back for the first time, and they ended up replacing them. Aaron's. Aaron's has not sponsored in NASCAR since after 2000, and I think it was after 2013, and I think 2014, actually, I think it was after 2015, they quit sponsoring after Michael Waltrip lost his team after 2015. They've not sponsored in the sport. Best Buy. Best Buy has not had a major sponsorship, I think, since 2012, and they sponsored Matt Kenseth. Actually, the last time they sponsored was 2013 or 2014 with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. They've had a little bit of one-off sponsorships when they work with Ryan Vargas, but they've not sponsored in many years. Office Depot. Office Depot is not sponsored in NASCAR, I believe, since 2015 or 2016, and that was a one-off, of course, with Ryan Reed. But they really haven't sponsored in NASCAR. And a final major company that I can think of as of right now, trust me, there's a lot more companies, but Furniture Row. Furniture Row, they stopped sponsoring after 2018, and they were the team that shut down after 2018, and Mark Truex Jr. came over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2019, and Furniture Row did not follow them over. And also 5 Hour Energy, they also dropped their sponsorship after 2018 as well. And this is also the sponsors that I can think of that have officially dropped sport. Trust me, there's probably a lot more that have dropped out of the sport, but these are all the major brandings and companies. You've also got other companies that have incorporated to their other brands. Budweiser, they've incorporated from Budweiser over to Busch. They've focused right now on their Busch branding right now, so that's why you haven't really seen any Budweiser logos or sponsorships in the last few years. Another company that dropped out of sport is Nationwide. Nationwide dropped out of sport, I think, after 2018 or 2019. They dropped out of the sport completely. That's another company I just thought about. Nationwide, they completely dropped out of the sport. Another company, though, that's also kind of changed up the branding is Kroger. Kroger doesn't just sponsor one car. They have a bunch of different brandings that come in from the Kroger family. Velveeta comes on at certain points. You see, of course, Hershey's is sponsored at certain points. You think about all the companies that come on. I think Tide's also sponsor them, and they're associated with the Kroger brand as well. And this is not something that is new to NASCAR. Over many, many years of the sport, we've seen this back in the 60s and 70s. And go back to those times, there's really no sponsors from the 60s and 70s, maybe besides Motorcraft, that are currently sponsoring in NASCAR today. And of course, you have sponsors that are still being loyal to this day that continue to sponsor in the sport. But what's happening is a lot of the really, really notable brands are leaving the sport. People recognize Home Depot. People, if they see Home Depot, in NASCAR, they may check out a NASCAR if they see a Home Depot. Dollar General is a very, very recognizable brand. And M&Ms has one of the most recognizable cars. And you think about what are the most notable cars in NASCAR history. The GM Goodwrench car. Of course, GM Goodwrench, they unfortunately shut down, I think, after 2000. GM Goodwrench shut down after, I think, 2005 or 2006. They shut down many, many years ago. But they've not sponsored in many, many years. DuPont, I think, of course, they converted to Exalted, but the Rainbow Warrior scheme, that scheme, of course, is associated with DuPont and those other companies and brands, and they don't really sponsor anymore at this particular point. Office Depot, everybody knows what Office Depot is. That's a major, major brand and a major, major company. Same thing goes with M&Ms. And M&Ms and Kyle Busch, and Elliott Sadler in a 38 car in the past, and Ernie Irvan and Derek Cope, people that associate with the M&Ms branding. That's a company that really associates, and people know what M&Ms are. People know what Skittles are. People know what the Mars company is and all those companies that associate with that. And I will tell you what are the big issues and what is the really big issue that is causing the problems right now. One of the biggest things is a really high cost. And some of these sponsors, of course, really left after basically the 2008 recession. Some of these companies, of course, left after 2008. And other brandings and sponsorships left after 2008 as well. But prices have absolutely skyrocketed over the last 10 years. And these teams are asking these sponsors to pay for a lot more. M&M's basically, I think, was paying, what, $23 or $24 million, I think, to sponsor for 28 races for Kyle Busch. And then, of course, there's other factors, too. But they asked for these companies to brand a lot and basically asked them to sponsor a lot. And it's a lot of these teams, they don't have the money to really sponsor them. Another big factor to that, of course, is change in ownership and a change in CEOs. Look at Lowe's, for instance. Lowe's had a change in the CEO. The last CEO was a massive fan of NASCAR, and they were a CEO for many years. But when the new CEO came in after 2017 and came into 2018, they basically went away from NASCAR, and they focused basically on football, and they really never gave a farewell and goodbye situation. And that's one thing that happened right there, is they basically had a change in CEOs right there. You think also about Mars and M&Ms, they got a change in CEOs and change in companies. Now, one thing that I will give a benefit to is they were getting a massive turn, basically a big return on investment. But unfortunately, what has ended up happening and what's going on is that these companies have a change in work. Now, of course, Mars has never said that they were getting a really good return on investment, but Joe Gibbs is going to say that because they don't want to talk about it in a negative way. And huge props at least to Mars to giving them one final season, and they have another sponsor that's going to come in. But that's another thing, too. When you have all these other big companies coming in, you have new companies coming in, but nobody really recognizes them. Focus Factor. Who really knows Focus Factor, to be perfectly honest with you? Most people really don't know what Focus Factor is. It's kind of a new company that's sponsoring Eric Jones. Yes, we're sponsoring like 26 or 28 races next year, almost 30 races next year, but they're not going to be sponsored for those, basically almost sponsored for the season. But a lot of people don't know what Focus Factor is, and a lot of people feel like that they're a shady company. And what can happen is you get a lot of these new startup companies that do come into sport, but what do you end up finding out is that over time, they end up being a lot of shady companies. Look no further, DC Solar. DC Solar sponsored for a couple of years. I think it started sponsoring, I think, in 2015 when they started sponsoring Brennan Poole. Then they got sued by Brennan Poole, and I think Chip Ganassi also got sued by Brennan Poole, and also the Spire Group basically got sued by Brennan Poole. And then basically the owner of the company, Jeff Carbuck, basically got arrested on Christmas Eve and then basically end up going to prison for over 30 and 40 years. And of course, over the years, it's nothing new. You always have a lot of shady companies. Like JD Stacy was a very, very shady individual. But of course, people think Camping World's a very, very shady company, but I don't think that Marcus Laws is a shady individual. That being said, though, of course, you have sponsors that do step up. But this is a major, major issue with cost and also a change in CEOs. So, what can NASCAR do to cause not many sponsors to leave? First of all, the costs need to 100% go down. It is insane how expensive it is right now to basically sponsor for a whole season. And that's one thing the next gen car is going to do. But this is something that is not going to happen overnight, where the spending cap is going to go down. So NASCAR has to find a way to basically maybe bring some sort of salary cap or something to where teams don't have to spend as much, and then teams can ask for less. Now, like I said, the next-gen car, that is supposed to come in next year, and that is hopefully going to fix some of the problems when it comes to sponsor. That I think is one thing that absolutely will maybe fix the problems, but I think that's not going to happen for the first year. I think that's going to happen over time. And teams need to ask for less. And another big thing is that, of course, the door number placement is probably potentially going to help sponsorships. But teams and drivers, when they bring sponsors in, drivers have to be activated with sponsors. You look at a lot of companies nowadays and what they used to do back in the 2000s. You had drivers in cars getting involved in cereal boxes and with Wheaties, because Wheaties is coming and sponsoring Bubba Wallace in 2022. What I'm hoping is for that company is that they can basically have Bubba Wallace's 23 car in their boxes, and also, of course, they're associated with the Jordan brand. But hopefully Wheaties can come in there and sponsor that as well and help out right there. And, of course, other sponsors dropping out too. But that's one thing, is that you have to have sponsorship activation and sponsorship engagement. And drivers have to be involved with that as well. And there are some drivers that do a really, really great job at it. Kevin Harvick with the Busch branding. I think it was, in 2020, I think with Busch Apple, they gained like 13.9% in sales in regards to Busch sponsorship and branding, just because of the Busch Apple, and they really did a great job on that. And Mobil One's another thing. You see Clint Bowyer involved in ads, and you see Kevin Harvick involved in ads, and you also see Bubba Wallace, who is also involved in DoorDash ads. And people that are fans of Bubba Wallace, like myself, they see DoorDash and they're like, hey, I'm going to try out this company as well. And also people look at Rowdy Energy, a newer company that's around. I know I'm bringing up Rowdy Energy, but Rowdy Energy is a company associated with Kyle Busch, and people are going to check that company out as well. Now, that's another thing too, is that, of course, you got to be more sponsorship activation and sponsorship engagement. And like I said, another big thing is that costs have to go down. But it honestly, if this does not turn around sooner or later, there are not going to be a lot of major sponsors staying. And I think that this is something that's going to continue to happen over the years if things don't change. And a lot of companies that are coming into sport and the companies that are saying they're not consumer-based. M&Ms is one of the last few companies that really is consumer-based. A lot of companies coming in are B2B deals, like I mentioned with the Kroger company. Basically, that's no longer a company that really supports just fans. That's a company that has a lot of sponsors, but it just associates with them. And look at Shell and Pennzoil. The only reason that Shell and Pennzoil have stuck around for as many years as they have is because of the fact that the Penske Trust, because Penske has a transport company that basically brings almost like boxes up in moving vans and stuff. They basically put their gasoline in their moving vans. So they use Pennzoil. That's a big thing right there. And I think that's something that's going to happen over the years, is they're not going to be basically focusing on the consumer. They're going to be focusing on the ownership and stuff. And that's one thing I hope that does change over the years. Now, like I said, hopefully with the next-gen car, this is something that can be fixed over the years and doesn't overall become a long-term problem. But I think that NASCAR sponsorship is something that has to change over the years. And teams, that's another thing I said, teams need to not ask as much for companies to basically spend. Teams are asking for $20 to $25 million for them to sponsor. And you look at other companies too, like FedEx, they've dropped some of their sponsorship. They're not sponsoring for every single race. Like I said, Exalted, they're not sponsoring as much anymore. And FedEx, of course, was one of the longtime sponsors that was basically sponsoring for every single race, and they're no longer sponsoring. Now, Alphabet has, of course, come in, and they've been sponsoring as well. But OfferPad, they're only sponsoring for your race, and of course FedEx still has a majority of the season, but they're not sponsoring for every single race anymore. And among other companies too that are currently sponsoring. Now, one of the lucky companies, of course, is HendrickCars.com. HendrickCars.com has continued to be a massive sponsor into the sport, and I think that if they get, because they're going to be still around at least through 2023, and they're kind of their own entity, and they're kind of their own company as well. So that's at least a positive right there. And I think that this is one thing, though, that has to change is sponsorship overall as a whole. It has to change over the next 10 years or the sport won't be recognizable. And the sport, unfortunately, will kind of hurt itself long-term down the road. And I think, of course, this has been a fact for many, many years since really NASCAR's peak. But this is something overall that has to change for the better for the fans, because if it doesn't happen, a lot of people are not going to recognize these brands, and less recognizable brands are going to be made over the years. So that's one thing I generally am hoping can be fixed very, very long term down the road. I hope it does get fixed really, really soon. So anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Links just below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about NASCAR's massive sponsorship exodus and all these NASCAR sponsors leaving? And do you think that there is a very strong chance that any of these sponsors can come back long term? And do you think the NASCAR sponsorship issues can be fixed long term down the road? Or do you think that this is an issue that's going to end up staying for many, many years? Let me know that in the comments below. I still got some massive products that are going to be hopefully on the way really, really soon. We're really, really close to the end of 2021. This year has absolutely been crazy, but we're not done making videos for 2021. We're really, really close to closing out this year for 2022 rolls around. So stick around for some videos that will be coming out before the end of this year. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.